We're joined now, though, by what used to be New Zealand Oil and Gas. They have rebranded themselves, Energy Resources Aotearoa. And their CEO is John Carnegie, who joins me in the studio now. John, pull that microphone into you a little closer. That's great. John, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Now, just for the uninitiated, what sort of groups, companies, people do you represent?
Well, we now represent a wider group of basically energy-intensive businesses that cover the entire energy value chain, from the upstream oil and gas explorers right down to the methanol producers and petrol wholesalers and retailers and people in between.
All right. And it would be fair to say most of your members are in one way or another in the old energy sector in fossil fuels, or would you say you're also part of new energy?
Oh no, we're absolutely a part of the new energy setup.
All right.
Even our existing our traditional upstream members, such as Todd, are investing in New Zealand's largest solar farm.
All right. Obviously, your members have got skin in the game when it comes to energy use and, if you like, the habitual use of energy by the New Zealander in the street. Firstly, can you tell me, given that, how much these policies announced yesterday are likely to reduce local or global carbon emissions?
No. in a word, none of that data is particularly clear, Sean. The plan is that they're going to try to reduce gross emissions, and they're going to do that by spending a heck of a lot of cash. Globally, it's almost impossible to tell how much it will reduce emissions. Even domestically, it's going to be really hard. But what they're trying to do is plan according to the emission reduction budgets, which have our gross emissions starting to step down, but whether or not these, and this is our biggest question, whether or not these policies that they've announced yesterday are going to be effective at doing that.
Does it say anywhere in the budget, this is the goal and this is how we measure it?
Yeah, well, of course. What they're trying to do is get us to net zero by 2050. I mean, that's the goal that both main political parties have signed up to. And last week they announced some emission reduction budgets, so it's effectively the caps for the units that they're going to release in terms of the ETS. So yes, and they're tracking down. In fact, they're more. One of them, I think, the current budget is going to be more aggressive than that recommended by their advisors, the Climate Commission. But all of this is plan, projection, hope.
Computer model.
The computer says yes. So
we cannot say how much global temperatures will fall as a result of this package and whether or not it will save the planet if it needs saving.
Oh, no, absolutely we cannot say that. I mean, particularly given that our contribution to emission reductions is so small. I think our global contribution is 0.2%. Now, look, that's not an argument to do nothing.
Yeah.
It's certainly an argument for caution and careful deliberation.
Okay, so we can't. This worries me, to be frank. We can't measure what we're trying to achieve through this package. Do you think this package? Let's say we can't measure it, but we're hopeful and we travel hopefully.
Yep.
Will this package reduce our carbon emissions?
Well, again, it should. It should. But we think they're actually taking the wrong approach to it.
Okay, why is that?
Well, actually, look, it's worthwhile me just stepping back for a minute and thinking about some, what's the phrase, brickbats and bouquets.
Yep, okay.
Actually, the bouquets are easier to deal with because there are fewer of them.
Okay.
So, it's quite useful. There are things that actually aren't in the plan. So the proposed new gas connection ban, gone, which is great.
Okay, so the gas network can continue growing.
Yeah, because they've realised that perhaps we need the infrastructure if we're going to transition to a different form of gas.
That's right. Okay.
Hydrogen. So that's a good thing. There was a possibility that the exemption of the exploration ban the expiration ban would be rolled out to onshore Taranaki, and there's no mention of that. Mm-hmm. So that's great. So
you can still go looking for fossil fuels?
Well, within existing permits.
Yeah.
So they've left that untouched, which is fantastic. The 100% renewable electricity target, that is now described as aspirational, which is what everyone...
Which is a nice way of saying we're never going to get there, so let's not pretend.
We hope the next time it's referred to, it's historical.
Yeah.
But it's aspirational, which is fantastic, because all of the government's advisors, and in fact most people in the energy sector, have been saying it's an unachievable target, or if it is achieved, it's going to be incredibly costly. And actually the other proposal that was on the table that isn't in the plan is a ban on the importation of internal combustion engine vehicles. So that's not there either, right?
Okay, so we can still, bring the used Jap imports in?
Yep. Subject to emission standards, but there was talk of just an outright ban.
Yeah.
So that's essentially the bouquets. In terms of the brickbats, well, unfortunately, the long-suffering taxpayers and consumers, I think, will hardly be dancing in the aisles.
Why not? But they're saving the planet.
Well, it's I generously describe it as a climate lolly scramble.
All right.
And we've got at least a couple of the measures. One is over, I think it's up to 2028, a $1 billion subsidy to industrials to decarbonise. Mm-hmm. There's the 570-odd million over the next 4 years for the cash for clunkers.
Cash for clunkers, yeah. What do you think of that, cash for clunkers?
We think it's likely to be a complete waste of money.
What? A complete waste of money?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And then there are other bits and bobs. Actually, the two other ones that I'd mention would be the 375 million for mode shifting. So that's more walking and cycling. I hope you've got a bike.
I have got a couple. They're a bit rusty at the moment.
I hope you've got a bike.
Yeah, now mode shifting. I'm sorry, man in the street. What does mode shifting mean? They want to reduce car journeys by 20%.
Yeah.
And have people walking and cycling more. What do you do? Do you put a pedometer on people, on each individual, and say you haven't made your quota of walking today? Well, it just seems to me a really strange, central control interference in people's lives.
Yeah, well, look, you've kind of got a point. I mean, the government and a range of others talk about we need to shift behaviour. We need to change behaviour of consumers. Well, clearly we think using the ETS is the best thing to do there, but their rhetoric is we need to shift behaviour as long as it's behaviour shift that we want.
Yeah, let's just dive into that a little more, because this is one of the things I think is going to be funny. So 375 million, you know what that's going to be? That's just going to be a PR and ad campaign spread across the friendly state-funded media. I mean, is there anything else that says that's not all it's going to be?
Oh, look, it may well be that. But how about the 61 million to pay bus drivers more?
Bus drivers get it pretty hard, I got to say.
No, yeah. I've got nothing wrong with them being paid more, but as a part of a climate change package.
Yeah, and it's...
What about train drivers?
Good point.
What about EV cab drivers?
Okay.
It's kind of, this stuff stretches, and, again, it kind of is consistent with our theme. This stuff stretches the credibility of policy settings.
Yeah.
We need to rely on the ETS.
Yeah, I know I've had talks with Oliver Hartwich from the New Zealand Initiative about that. He says the ETS was literally designed globally to be left to its own devices.
Yep.
And it works most efficiently, the emissions trading scheme, where you let the market find the efficiencies. And he argues that any interference fundamentally by the government in that process reduces the efficiency of the ETS in reaching certain goals.
Yep, I couldn't agree more with Oliver, and in fact his amazing economist Eric Crampton.
Eric Crampton, yeah.
So the fundamental problem that we have with things like the cash for clunkers and the industrial subsidy is that when you're operating in a emissions trading scheme market with a fixed cap, all you're doing is shuffling emissions around. So you take emissions out of industrials, the units that they would have otherwise bought get freed up somewhere else, depresses the price of carbon and emissions occur somewhere else. And that's kind of the part of the key problem we have with the policy setting, is that a focus on gross emissions rather than net means we're going to have government and policymakers constantly chasing emissions. It'll be like whack-a-mole. So they'll push down in one place, they'll pop out somewhere else, they'll bring a policy lever, bang. They'll push out somewhere else, they'll bring down another policy lever. And that's just a recipe for, well, policy incoherence.
And why don't you like cash for clunkers? That's great. It's just pushed up the price of my old car if I'm low income or middle income enough.
Yes, well, I doubt that for a start. But
you don't know. You haven't seen the financials of the platform, mate.
But again, it's just a waste. So you take those off, you reduce emissions there. Actually, all you're doing is freeing up for someone else to emit and buy those units. So actually, it will make zero difference to our overall emissions. It will just shuffle them around. And that's the problem with handing money out. Now, in fact, actually, if they were just going to give that money back as a dividend, then actually that's probably not a bad idea.
So explain, what do you mean by a dividend?
Oh, look, well, they're taking whatever it is, $4.5 billion out of emitters to supposedly fund all of this stuff. Well, if you're worried about the distributional impacts of doing that, then you should use the right tool for the job. That's welfare policy or tax policy. They are the right tools. This is the thing, I'm a bit slow on the uptake here. What does welfare policy or tax policy have to do with reducing emissions? How can you use that? Well, because if you rely on the ETS, actually you could get distributional problems. So the impact, just like tax, impact will be greater on those of lower incomes. So if you think that's a problem, you don't try and play with the ETS. Actually, what you try and do is you use welfare policy, right? Because you let the ETS do what it was designed to do, which is to send a clear signal across the economy. And, there's a slight issue of large portion of the economy not being covered by the ETS, but traditionally...
No, you having to go at the farmers?
Sorry, what?
You having to go at the farmers?
No, not at all. I think, in an ideal world, actually what you'd get is you'd have an economy-wide trading scheme, but we're not in an ideal world. So...
Yeah, you are having to go at the farmers, all right. So overall, $2.9 billion, and a very simple question, is this going to make a blind bit of difference?
Well, look, probably not, given the waterbed effect. So they're going to push down, they're going to send a lot of money over to industrials, it'll free up units somewhere else. Probably not, which is why we say rely on the ETS and rely on other tools if you've got other problems.
So you're disappointed?
Yeah, we are disappointed.
Yeah, were you consulted much before this package came out?
So
were you consulted much before this package came out?
Well, we were consulted along with everybody else.
And what did that consist of?
Responding to a consultation document that MFE put out.
Yeah.
So, in that we were quite clear about our view that actually they should rely on the ETS and that if they have other objectives other than a price on carbon, they should use other tools.
All right. So what would you keep if you were James Shaw and you got the chance to, let's say, turn the clock back 2 weeks? What would you have done yesterday?
I would have announced a strong support for the use of the ETS as the primary mechanism to deliver the gains. I would have announced a carbon dividend.
All right. Yeah. And is there anyone in particular in your group who is going to have genuine commercial difficulty as a result of the announcements yesterday? Or is this the Fed farmers basically said to us, from what they could see, rather neutral for them. For the energy sector, what does this mean?
Well, for some of the players in the energy sector, such as the electricity generators, it's probably good because what we're going to do is we're going to decarbonise by electrification, which is fantastic. Major industrials, I think, are going to struggle. The cost of fuel is going to go up and the cost of their inputs and therefore products are going to go up.
And therefore the cost of living goes up because at the end of the day, the cost of transport comes through to the supermarket, comes through to everyone. I guess it's great news if you're a bus driver, though, John.
Yeah, but I don't mean to pick on bus drivers, but who's going to pay for that extra $61 million? So is that going to be fares going up or is it going to be taxpayers? So, again, this is the thing. So we might have managed the price of the ETS by saying actually we're going to just send dollops of cash over to X, Y, and Z. But there's a real economic cost to that. I mean, the cost doesn't go away. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
And we cannot say how much we'll reduce our emissions by, and we don't know if we're going to save the planet, which is really, I suppose, in a big picture way, what this is all meant to be about, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we think the policy settings are wrong and they're unlikely to achieve their objectives. I mean, actually, a useful example, just before wrapping up, is the industrial subsidy scheme. Their last round, run out of ECA, delivered emission reductions. This was, I think they gave out, so what did they give out? They gave out some number of millions, right?
Yeah.
So they gave out 13 million for 900,000 tonnes emission reduction.
Yeah.
That's the same level of emission reductions that we would have got in the beginning 6 months of 2021, Huntly running on gas.
Yeah. Great.
So there you go.
Yeah, no, I just want to check, did you cycle in this morning or walk?
No,
or?
I caught a cab, as it happens.
Well, you see, that's a Prius. That's halfway there, isn't it?
Indeed.
John Carnegie, thank you very much, CEO of Energy Resources Aotearoa. Similarly, I guess, to Federated Farmers, unimpressed. Maybe we are not saving the planet this morning.